Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to cut through all the noise, all the hype, and honestly, all the fear around AI and what it actually means for your career. We're going to go beyond the headlines because the reality is way more nuanced and frankly, a lot more interesting.
So let's just dive right into the big one. The question that's on literally everyone's mind. Will AI take my job? And you know what? That's a completely valid concern. You see all these stories about layoffs, about whole careers just disappearing, and it's almost impossible not to feel a little anxious. But is that really the full story?
To get a real answer, we have to do something really important first. We need to separate the wild speculation from what is actually happening on the ground, in the real world. So let's peel back those layers of hype and get to the core of what this disruption is all about.
Okay, this right here is the first and maybe the most crucial distinction you have to make. The conversation isn't really about entire jobs just vanishing into thin air overnight. It's about the individual tasks that make up all of our jobs. AI is a tool, a really powerful one, that's brilliant at automating certain tasks, but definitely not all of them.
In fact, we can break down pretty much all work into this simple matrix. You've got cognitive or brain work versus physical body work. And then you have repetitive versus creative or complex tasks. Now, the bullseye for where AI is having the biggest impact today, it's right in that repetitive cognitive box. Think about things like basic data entry, simple legal filings, or resetting a password for the 100th time. Those are just perfect for automation. Everything else, well, that's where we humans still have a major advantage.
So, if AI is getting better and better at all those repetitive brainy tasks, what's left for us? This is where things get really exciting, because this is where the true opportunity lies. And it's something that the technology, by itself, simply can't touch.
And this creates a really interesting paradox, right? We all have access to these amazing tools. ChatGPT, Gemini, you name it. So if the technology is basically leveling the playing field for everyone, what becomes the new differentiator? How do you provide value that someone else with the exact same tool can't?
The answer isn't a better AI model. It's the human touch. It's your insight, your empathy, your understanding of the context. It's all about how you apply the technology. And there's this perfect real-world story about a life-saving AI that just illustrates this beautifully.
So picture this. A company called Fractal develops this phenomenal AI called Cure.ai. It could analyze an X-ray scan and spot tuberculosis with an accuracy rate that was even better than a human doctor. For places in the world with a shortage of doctors, this should have been a complete game changer. A massive success, right?
But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. When they actually rolled it out in hospitals, the adoption rate was just shockingly low. The doctors, the very people this was built to empower, they just weren't using it. The technically superior product was, for all intents and purposes, failing.
Why would that even happen? I mean, think about it. The tech was more accurate, it could save lives, it could speed up a diagnosis. Why on earth would anyone just ignore a tool like that?
It turns out the problem wasn't the tech at all. It was the human workflow. A behavioral scientist went in and simply observed the doctors. And what they found was that these overworked professionals just didn't have the time or the mental bandwidth to open a whole separate application. It was one extra click, one more screen to look at, one more mental headache in a very stressful day. The solution wasn't a better AI, it was a tiny design change, making the result a simple pop-up inside the software they were already using. That tiny tweak, born from pure human observation, made all the difference.
And this quote from Rishi Seth over at Fractal just sums it up perfectly. The value wasn't just in the AI's technical ability. It was in understanding the person who had to use it. That deep understanding of context, of workflow, of a user's real-world needs, that is the uniquely human skill that actually made the technology successful.
So how do we take this amazing idea of the human differentiator and turn it into practical skills you can actually use? Because it's about so much more than just learning how to write a good prompt. It's really about cultivating a whole new mindset.
Let's get to another one of those huge questions, especially if you're in any kind of technical field. With AI that can write its own code, should you even bother learning any more?
The answer is a loud, resounding no. Absolutely not. Think of AI as a massive productivity boost, like having the world's best assistant, but it's not a replacement for fundamental understanding. Your foundational skills, like coding, are your anchor,
Because when that AI-generated code inevitably has a bug or doesn't do what you expect, you are the one who has to debug it. You can't just tell your boss, sorry, ChatGPT wrote that one. You are still responsible.
So beyond the hard technical skills, what is it that really makes you valuable in this new world? Well, companies like Fractal are on the lookout for 3 core traits. 1, being humble. You're a team player, you're willing to ask questions. 2, being hungry. You're curious. You're always trying to understand the why behind a project. And 3, being smart. Not just book smart, but aware of what's happening and willing to adapt. In a world full of AI assistants, these human qualities, they're basically your superpower.
Okay, with those skills in mind, let's pull back the curtain a bit more and look at how companies are actually bringing AI into their day-to-day operations. First things first, you can forget this idea of a company just flipping a giant AI switch and transforming overnight. The reality is so much more cautious and strategic. It looks a lot less like a big bang and a lot more like a pyramid. So, at the very bottom of this pyramid, you have fully autonomous decisions. This is for the low-impact, repetitive stuff, like automatically approving a simple expense report. In the middle, you get to assisted decisions. Think of a doctor getting a recommendation from an AI, but they're still in the loop. They make the final call. And then way up at the top, you have the big strategic decisions. Here, the human is completely in control, just using AI for data and insights. The rule is simple. The higher the stakes, the more essential the human becomes.
This pyramid really shows how businesses are dipping their toes in the water very, very carefully. They start with low-risk internal projects, like an HR chatbot for employees. They pilot it in one small specific area, they measure the results, and only then do they even think about scaling it up. That old Silicon Valley mantra of move fast and break things, yeah, that definitely does not apply to AI adoption in big companies.
So this all brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. What does this mean for your next move? There's this fantastic metaphor from that classic little book, Who Moved My Cheese? It's about these mice in a maze who get really comfortable with the huge supply of cheese they found. But some of the mice notice that the cheese pile is getting a little smaller every day, so they go off in search of new cheese. The other mice? They just stay put, assuming the cheese will last forever, until one day, it's all gone. In this story, your career is the cheese, and the cheese is moving. The skills that companies value are shifting. So the big takeaway today is to be proactive, not reactive. Stay humble, hungry, and smart. Keep learning and double down on that uniquely human touch, because that is your ultimate career insurance in the age of AI. So I'll just leave you with this final thought. Are you watching your cheese?